let's start. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today to this workshop, which has been jointly organized by the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Data Alliance, the G7 Future of the Seas and Oceans Initiative, and the Horizon 2020 Blue Cloud, Atlantic and Atlantico projects as a side event at the All-Atlantic 2021 Research and Innovation for a Sustainable Ocean Stakeholder Conference. I am Sara Pittonet. I'm a Senior Project Manager at Trust IT, and I have the pleasure to be the coordinator of the Blue Cloud project and the host of this event today. We have a very dense agenda, so I'm pleased to welcome Fabienne Jacques, Policy Officer at the Directorate General Defense Industry and Space of the European Commission, for the official opening of the workshop. Fabienne, the floor to you.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning, I don't know, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this opening. So I will try to be brief. I don't have slides. First of all, I won't recall anything about the interest and importance of this all-Atlantic action and the fact that we are sharing a common good that we have to take care of. So on the Commission side, I may recall some of our priorities. First of all, the Commission is really engaged in climate neutrality by 2050, and we have the so-called European Green Deal initiative, which is really going across all our actions in order to reach this goal. So the European Green Deal includes the ocean dimension. It's important to understand it, and even if it's not obvious, because we have to green, I would say, our blue economy activities, such as aquaculture, our transport. We will rely on a massive development of renewable energies, partly in the ocean, so all of this is important. At the European level also, we have many of our marine-related policies, the MSFD, the Basin Water Directive, and so on and so forth, that will go under revision in the coming years to come in order to enforce these changes that we want to show. We will have by the end of the year also a communication on ocean observations by DG Mare, because it's really, really important that we improve the deployment of ocean observation with the support of member states, because we lack sustainability in our ocean observation, and this is really the basis for everything afterwards. We will have also a very big research action called Mission on Ocean, Seas and Inland Waters that will take over during 7 years in order to sustain all what we want to do across DGs and across the Commission on the oceans. At the international level, we are really there. So we're really animating the International Ocean Governance Discussion and Forum worldwide in order to share best practices and to improve what we want to do collectively. We are also very active in the G7 Future Seas of Ocean Initiative, G7 in general, and also in Geo Blue Planet, in order to convey also our messages internationally on what has to be done in the ocean, including with the UN Decade of Ocean, which is really important for us, and where we want to have an EU visibility and an EU participation, which is important. Galway and Belém statement, you know them, they are the first building blocks at basin scale when we come back to the Atlantic scale, and this is part of this overall strategy. Before to start the meeting, I would like to come back to the session that we will listen to and come back to a more pragmatic approach. Sharing ocean data is not new. Because the ocean community is quite well organized, we should be convinced on it and appreciate it. But we have in front of us clearly new challenges and also new opportunities to consider. And for me, that raises some questions on which you will have answers, or that may raise questions also for you. First of all, we should build on what we exist. Because we have quite a lot of work done already by Goose, Ocean View, IMBER, and many other programs internationally on which we can build. On the EU side, we will bring our backbone, I would say, our core assets, which are Copernicus and IMONET, on which we will that we want to federate and also integrate in the Destination Earth initiative. But then, how do we nest all of these initiatives that we have everywhere? This is an important question, and how we can be organized not to duplicate the work, but then also guarantee the continuity, the quality of what we do, and the sustainability of all of what we share, and these infrastructures. I think then we have to work on the sources of data. So we have data sharing initiatives that are popping up everywhere, but we should never forget the source of data. And can we go beyond to get more data rather than rearranging what we have, collecting, accessing more data sources on biology, on coming from Internet of Objects, coming from companies, making data archaeology, reaching socioeconomic data, citizen science. I think this is an important point, again, to go beyond what we have today, which could really bring something. I think we need also to optimize our efforts, because this is difficult, toward clear targets as well. And I think this is part of the question that will be raised by Martine. A lot is done in G7, in G20, in GEO, in Blue Planet. So if we go for an all-Atlantic data space or something, data sharing infrastructure at the Atlantic scale, for what and for whom? So that what we do is really meeting its community at the end. And for me, what is really important is maybe not to build again a core infrastructure, but really to think about the last mile, really trying to nest what we have as a global data center, regional data center, and trying to work on the last mile to reach the users, but to reach the owners of data. I think this is something that should be maybe thought, given the overall landscape. And my last point is about the digital move. Digital, this is a buzzword. We have plenty of buzzwords, data space, digital twin, and so on. So I think it's needed. I think technology really can accelerate the cooperation, the share, the fertilization. But this is complex, I think. So what is the priority? What is the priority? On what we should start, I think, is a question. What is the first building block, and how to step in all of that, and under which condition? So we're talking about standards, it's easy, but what about data policy, about governance, about tools for the uptake of all of these digital tools? So I think this is what I wanted to say to open the discussion. And this four last point, I'm sure that you have all the answers, many answers to all of that. You thought about it. So I'm really happy to listen and learn from what you will say in coming minutes, I would say, and hours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabienne. And with this very timely introduction, I welcome our moderators. So this workshop is structured around two panels. So we'll have a first session moderated by Jay Perlman, who is the co-chair of the steering group of the Ocean Best Practices Systems. And he also works with IEEE with a focus on marine observation and data. He will be then followed up by Martin Wisbeck, head of the Physical Oceanography Research Unit at GeoMar. So Jay, the floor is yours. And while you welcome your speakers, I remind that we really want this workshop to be interactive. So during the session, you will be invited to follow us on menti.com using a code that you will show later on and debate with us there. Jay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. And Fabienne, thank you very much for a very interesting introduction, offering us both opportunities, but also challenges. And how do we build to focus on the last mile, perhaps is a good theme for this panel and maybe some of the discussions. Jay,
you want to switch your displays? We see your sort of view. Just click swap display on the top.
Swap display.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that. This session is entitled Measure Once, Use Many Times, and focuses on our ability to take advantage, as Fabian said, of the things that have been built already. In this, we'll look at standards, best practices, challenges, and incentives for maximizing the use of ocean data in the Atlantic region. We know what standards are, but many times we're asked what are best practices. So for the purposes of the discussion today, I'd like to just point out a definition perhaps we can use. Best practices are created, I would emphasize, by the community and for the community. They're not a hand-down process, but they're a bottoms-up and community process. And a best practice is a methodology that has repeatedly produced superior results relative to other methodologies with the same objective. And in this, best practices can be defined in many ways: standard operating procedures, manuals, and more recently, videos and other means of the environment and our learning process. Let me give you some thoughts about them. These will be short and overview. Many times best practices in the past have been thrown into the drawer has been closed and life moves on. But these are living documents and we really require continuing community feedback. And that's important. And that means we have to make the documents easy to update, easy to use, particularly for the Atlantic region as a whole. We have to be able to address differing infrastructure and capacity levels. Thus, training is essential and should be built into the process of propagating and adopting best practices. The last comment that I have here is that many times when people begin in a field, oceanography, data, and other things, they see many best practices and they don't know which ones to use, which ones are better for certain particular applications. And so with the work of GOOS and the Ocean Best Practice System, we've defined an endorsement process, and the endorsement would guide the new members of the community as to which particular best practices would work for their needs. With that, let's look at the agenda for our session today. We're looking at expanding interoperability through the use of international best practices and standards, and in particular, how they can contribute towards moving through further collaboration in the Atlantic region. And in particular, we should look at the insights and lessons that we've learned, and the panel has many experience in order to move this forward. And so what we're looking at, for example, is the sharing of best practices toward fair data and interoperability, and here with practical lessons across the region. There are three key questions that we have posed to the panelists and which we will discuss during the next hour. The first is, how can we propagate the use of standards and best practices across the region, following up on the comments I just made. And this is from the perspective of each of the panelists. And what are the key areas of standards and best practices in the activities? Second, what are the current gaps in the Atlantic data space today? And in particular, what practices are still needed in the region to strengthen collaborations and partnerships? The third and final question is, can we define key best practices to build a sustained data capability across the region? And here I'd like to focus on the fact of these sustained capabilities. And that includes aspects of the tools, the trainings, and the latest open science blue cloud technologies that make the data fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So those are the questions the panel will address. I'd like to introduce the panel, and then each of them will introduce themselves in the next few minutes. Alan Arnaud from Mercator Ocean, Connor Delaney from eModNet. Jose Molbert is a professor at the Institute of Oceanography at the Federal University of the Rio Grande. Tashkana Rasiloma is with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in South Africa. Dick Shop is with Maris and is also technical coordinator of Blue Cloud. And then Lucy Scott, who's with the Ocean Infrahep project at the IODE. And with that, let me turn to our panelists and let's go ahead and let them introduce themselves. May we start with Alain?
Thanks, Jay. So I think it's time to show our slide just to confirm. Yeah. We share the screen or do you pass?
Yes, you should be able to share it, Alain.
Okay, let's try. Just a second. Here we go. So thank you, Jay. Thank you for the invitation. So as you say, my name is Alain Arnaud. I'm from Metadata Standards International, and I think this activity, or let's say this possibility to have the data reused several times is a bit one of the essence of the creation of Mercator and the Copernicus service, because we started with a program that's called My Ocean, in which we have decided, to put together, let's say, different sources of information to federate them, to make them common for different actors doing their own model of oceanographic and marine prediction. And I think this was one of the examples of what can be done when you put together all the resources. We make what we call the thematic assembly center. So we use those data all together to create some very specific, like wind thematic assembly center, ice, something like that. So we mutualize that for a single product, and afterward this was used for several regions. So this is a clear example of what can be done when you do you use a standard, you use this activity of mutualization and standardization and reuse of different data for several usages. And I think it's just an example of what can be done, of course, at a bigger level, but with 100,000 users, I think it's also quite successful itself. And I think what we can do now in the future, that will be the question raised in here, is how to extend that. From the Copernicus Marine Service, we had extended that in the data. It's not really in this case standardization. It's much more to create some way to use them, because at the end of the day, a good standard is also a standard that it used. So what is very important now, of course, apart from all the work, the technical work and almost legal work of standardization, is to create some uptake of the data that are standardized. And we're really insisting a lot on that now, with something like the Wikio project, on which, let's say, we are federating different sources of information from the Copernicus services and satellite. Blue Cloud, as you mentioned, is one of them, which more focus on the, let's say, data management infrastructure that will be described by Dick later on. And of course, we cannot just say, at our marine level. So what will happen in the next years with the digital twin of oceans is something when you open that, let's say, both in terms of usage, but also in terms of data access to different sources of information, to have, I don't know, some data on population, on economical use, everything that could be used together with the marine data for that. So I think here again, standardization work would be really huge in those activities to have those intercommunication between different twins. So let's say here where we are today at Mercator, what we are doing, both, let's say, up to operational level with Copernicus Marine Service and Wikio, and at R&D level with Blue Cloud, and of course with the projection in digital twin. And let's say, I think this is the end of my presentation. You can go to see what can be done on the different web portals that I mentioned here. But I will be very pleased to discuss, or also, let's say, to promote the use of standard, not just to create a standard, because a standard that is not used is not really really useful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Alain. I'd like to turn now next to Connor Delaney from eModNet. Connor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just got my screen up. So, are you seeing anything? Because I'm just seeing a black screen here.
Yeah, we're seeing the view graphs, but we're seeing part of it. So
Okay.
There you go. And if you want to put it in display mode, that would be fine.
I'll have to do this again. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what's happening.
Do you have the ability to put it on full screen, Connor?
I am.
Lower right, the screen with the down arrow just at the very bottom.
Yeah, the problem I'm having here is I've just had to disconnect my second screen because that's what's causing the problem.
Oh, okay. We can use it in whatever way
We can show it if you like, Connor. We have the presentation, so we can project it if you like. So you can see it.
Just one more moment here.
Otherwise, we go to the. I suggest you move to the third panelist while Connor fixes this.
We just one more moment. Sorry about this. It's embarrassing. While being the technical coordinator of eModNet.
Here you are.
That'll be fine if you just make it bigger.
You know what? You're going to have to come back to me because there's a problem here on my machine.
Yeah, let's go on for a moment then, and we'll come back.
Yeah.
Let me introduce then Jose Maubert, and he's with the University of Rio Grande in Brazil. Jose, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks, Jay and Sarah, for inviting me to participate in this event. I would ask Federico if you could put up my screen. Connor, I was having exactly the same problem. That's why in a previous session. So I just asked Federico to show that it would be easier. So I'll bring you in a different perspective for the data issue that you're probably mostly used to. It's a perspective from from developing countries from South America, which maybe apply also to other parts of the Atlantic realm. We've been, could I have next slide, please? So I'm at the University of Rio Grande, all the way in south of Brazil, very close to the border to Uruguay. We are an academic research institution, and we've been collecting data for many times. So we've been collecting once and using once, but maybe not being able to use many times as it would be desirable, because throughout this time we didn't have a tradition in our institution for data care. By data care, I mean we didn't implement like a metadata policy on our data. We didn't have best practices. We have some quality control on the collection of the data and the numbers, but not actually on how the data is set up. And this has become a big problem now because we're finishing up a first generation of researchers. We are relatively young. We started in the 70s. So people are retiring now. And when people retire, and a lot of this data is still in paper mode, or in floppy disks, or in CDs, or in DVDs, you just cannot read them, you cannot access them. So there is a big, huge need to rescue this data and put it in a standard that everybody can use it. So this is a rampant need that we need to address, and we have attempts, some attempts to overcome the problem, and I would point you to that. Next slide, please, Federico. So there are many solutions out there. There are many good repositories. And one that I used, particularly in my case, where I had on my hands 40 years of ichthyoplankton surveys on the shelf of southern Brazil. And this data was was in different formats, in different places. So I looked up to Pangaea, and they provided me professional data help. That's one big thing. We need to move away from, all of us as scientists from biology or whatever background we have, think that we understand and we can resolve the data issue. We cannot do that. We need to look for and to reach out to people that really understand about data and how to set it.
We might have missed Jose. He said he might have connection details, but I think he managed to present the main struggle. I mean, they are facing, or at least he's reporting on. So I think we come back to you, Connor, in the meantime.
Okay.
We need to stop sharing. Yeah.
Can you just share my presentation? Is that possible?
Yeah, give us a while. Federico, you have it, right? Yeah, great.
Sorry, I think I got kicked out. I'm back. I don't know if you want to continue with me or go back to Connor. Or... Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
No, don't worry, Jose. Well, while we retrieve Connor's presentation, I think we only missed your closing. So if you, without your presentation, but your message passed very well, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So Connor.
So I start.
Yeah.
So I assume that this is the presentation that hasn't got the typos fixed. So excuse my spelling mistakes in here, please, if they appear. Hi, I'm Conor Delaney. I'm the technical coordinator at the eModNet Secretariat. And when I was asked to give this presentation, I thought, well, what can I take to this? And really what I thought is that I noticed the other presentators are doing the same, is try and relate things back to my own personal experience. If we go to the first slide there, please. So for those of you who don't know, eModNet is the European Marine Observation Data Network. And we gather in situ observations from around a number of different thematic areas, from bathymetry, geology, biology, chemistry, physics, and sea habitats and human activities. And we share that data out using INSPIRE standards and FAIR data principles. So you're looking at aggregated data sets and data products. And we follow best practice in sharing searchable metadata. We have data services. Essentially, we are a distributed spatial data infrastructure. We also have data products with corresponding metadata, and we use OGC standards. So we're doing a lot of the things that are regarded as best practice at the moment. So I'm just going to move now on to the last two slides on my own personal experience with Atlantic data. So for me, working as an environmental data scientist since the 1990s, I started off in a situation where data was hard to get. Even for me working in Ireland, I couldn't get access to the data I needed because it was being published by the government. Nobody wanted to share it. They didn't know how to share it. You'd have to find somebody who would put it on a disk and post it to you. But the big change I've seen over the years has been the rise of open data and open data policies from governments and open data licensing. And in the USA, you have who are on the other side of the Atlantic. NOAA's been sharing, has essentially been an open data group since the 1970s. In Ireland, the Irish government had started off its open data policy in 2017 in response to the European Commission's public data instruments. And now recently, the European Union has got a new open data directive. It's a refresh of the old one. And it promises to make or hopefully will make a lot more public sector information and data available for use. So for me, working on the Atlantic shoreline from Galway, I was able to access in my work data that was made available through the Irish Marine Institute or through NOAA to look at the work we're doing in the Atlantic Ocean. And my perspective is not as a data producer, as a personal perspective. My personal perspective is as a data consumer. So for me, it was always about how to get to the data in formats that I could understand and I could use. Now in eModNet, we are currently refreshing our data products catalog, and we're moving everything over to Creative Commons by license, or nearly everything over to Creative Commons by license. And we also have a lot of high value data sets as defined by the directive. So we are already making those available through APIs. Next slide, please. So in terms of collect at once, serve many, if you look at a marine data community and look at the technologies they use and the data formats they use, then you can actually leverage the things they've built in the past. You know, there's always a problem of the community memory as new scientists or new data scientists come along, and older ones retire. They will forget, or there will be a loss of the knowledge that existed. Now, a great example I have here, a very recent example, is that the NetCDF data format for binary data and the climate forecast metadata conventions, if you use those for publishing grid data, then you will be able to use many other different types of tools, such as Threads, AirDAP, Python, or ArcGIS, GDAL, who have libraries for doing that. And we are started to use that in the central portal. And a great example of this is my colleague Dick Schaap, and he leads the eModNet bathymetry team. They are publishing their bathymetry DTM products in NetCDF format, and we have started experimenting with using those files in a technology which we don't produce. It's an open source technology produced by the Americans, and we've started using it. And you can see at the moment there in the picture at the bottom of the screen, a nice screen grab of the output from one of the tiles. So, but by not reinventing the wheel and building on previous success, you create an environment where you are pushing your data and your data products out there, and not swamping them in new technologies. Because if you started producing new technologies, you then have to sell those technologies on to the users. So that's my 2 cents based on my experience, and I'm delighted to be here.
Connor, thank you very much, and certainly a lot of good experience. We're running short of time, as you might imagine, from all of the challenges we faced. Can we keep the presentations to a little under 3 minutes as planned? Let's move on then to Chicano Rasiloma from South Africa. Chicano? And let's try and keep this to 3 minutes, please. You're on mute if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Jay, and thank you, colleagues. I just want to present just a quick preview of the South African Marine Information Management System. It's a new system, it's an open archival system that was just created in 2018. What you have here on the first screen is the beta version of the system. However, I was just informed by our technical team yesterday that the stable and final release of the website has just been completed, and the second URL they can be used to access this service, this system. So I'm an ocean climate information manager from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. I'm a physical oceanographer by trade. And in terms of data and data rescue management, I've got experience of working with the WMO Indian Ocean Data Rescue, and I've got all the experience in terms of this data management. In terms of what the MEMS, or the Marine Information Management System of South Africa, entails, our purpose is to provide long-term storage and preservation of marine data, which is specifically generated by our national department, and to also make this data available to the entire community while encouraging collaboration. The data that we collect is a multivariate data from our research voyages, as well as the monitoring and operational models. We do create what we call ocean decision tools that we offer to our users, and that come as model outputs that and packages that we serve to the user. We also host the old SATCO data repository that many of you may know of. However, the SATCO data is was an old data center, which we have now hosting, and we are busy harvesting all the metadata that can be found in SATCO, and soon this whole data can be accessed from MEMS. I'm also one of the reps and manager of the Afro-based node within the Orbis. So in terms of the standards that we have within MEMS, we do have common standards, and we do have metadata sheets that we send to our data providers, as well as the people that wants to access the data. And this metadata is for both the ocean physics as well as the biological data that we collect within the department. And the biological data that we collect in the department follows the Darwin core, as well as the ecological metadata language. We do have sharing protocols that people that send the data, provide the data, can access using the unique DOIs. We do have automation of data workflows, and of course, we do adhere to the FAIR principle. In terms of the insights and the knowledge that we have learned while developing the system, we realized that by following all the international best practices, we were able to facilitate discovery, data discovery, as well as exchange. But most importantly, the constant engagement with and support to our data owners as well as users has helped in facilitating this data uploading onto the system that we have. And right now, we've just procured a new system which will add an upgrade to our system in terms of infrastructure, which will increase the capability, computational capability, and we do plan to allow the cross-link of metadata harvesting with the global network. One of these examples that I can just mention is when we were requested to provide ocean acidification data to the UN Decade of Science. We're able to do that right now. And that's in all my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion of what looks like a capable system. Let's turn to Dick Shop now from Mars. Dick, the floor is yours.
Okay. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes, it's fine. If you want to make them in presentation mode.
You can see the presentation mode or not?
That's good.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, my background is in marine data management. I've been working on this for 40 years now. And I want to say something about the European landscape. If you look at this poster on the left that was made by Eurogoose, you can see that we have, let's say, 3 levels, more or less. We have those who are collecting the data by any means. Then we have a number of aggregators, and they are especially focused on data management. And there in Europe, we have 3, let's say, major power blocks. One is CDataNet. It's more looking at archives of data. EMUDnet, more looking at turning data into products. And then we have Copernicus, more looking at also, let's say, forecast. So you have the past, the present, and the future. But these are not the only ones, because we have several other research infrastructures and other infrastructures that are bringing together the data. And those are data, let's say, in many different disciplines. Because if we want to have a whole, let's say, an approach for the marine ecosystem, we need data from various types, not only physics and chemistry, but also bathymetry, geology, geotechnic, biology, genomics, etc. And that's a little bit illustrated here, that over time in Europe, we built up quite an infrastructure with these aggregators. And then on the bottom, let's say the top part of the poster, you see, of course, the intermediaries and also the end users who are very interested in products, derived products, but also in adding value to products that are given to them. And I want to zoom in a little bit on CData. CData is the network of the national oceanographic data centers in Europe. We started in the 80s, building this up, and now we are fully in machine-to-machine interactions, but also human interactions. And we also are approaching this with what we call a very rich metadata model with the linked data principles. And everything is done by with Sparkle and with machine-to-machine APIs. And one of the major parts of this is the CDI, which is the Data Discovery and Access Service, in which we bring now together data from more than 110 data centers. And also recently we upgraded this with the data cache, where all the open data, more than 90%, is let's say, replicated, so we can have a fast delivery to users. And of course, there are several machine services around it, let's say, to make it easy for users. Also, what we do as CData from the start, as national oceanographic data centers, we are promoting standards, we are developing standards, and we also have educational programs, and also we have a lot of software which allows you to deploy. And one of the major elements is also vocabulary. So there's a rich vocabulary, more than 110 lists. These are all done by RDF, let's say also SCOS services, web services, and picked up worldwide. And this way we are able to speak the same language and to create the data really into interoperable data. And also reusable, because there's a lot of, as you've seen with all these directories, we know a lot about the data, not only just pure the data set, but also the crews, the people involved, the publications, the projects, etc. As Blue Cloud, we are doing the next level, you would say. Let's say we have all these infrastructures in Europe, many, and we want to go one step further, is that we want to make use of the data in let's say, for solving complex challenges, especially in a multidisciplinary domain. And for that purpose, we follow this model that we have one side, we have discovery and access. So we are federating on top of the existing infrastructures, more or less making it easier for those who do not know to find those and make use of those data sets. And then having standardized sets. And then on the top, we have a virtual research environment, quite powerful with, let's say, heavy computing, but also with a lot of algorithms, by which we are working with several scientific groups on demonstrators, which can illustrate that it makes sense, let's say it adds value to do web-based science. So sharing and using multidisciplinary data with applications to solve major issues in society. And this is a way forward. And it's also in connection with the Digital Earth, but it's also in connection with what we call the European Open Science Cloud, which is also propagating web-based science and web-based open science. So these are my 10 cents, let's say, for starting the presentation. Speak to you later about the questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dick. Let's turn to our last speaker, and I'd like to introduce Lucy Scott from Ocean Infrahep Project. Lucy.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Sarah, for the invitation to join the panel. Just sharing my slides. I have a brief perspective from the Ocean Infrahep project on what we are doing to support marine metadata interoperability. So the Ocean Infrahep project is a global initiative to improve access to marine and coastal data and information It's a new project, but it builds on IODE's 60-year history of supporting countries in their data and information management efforts. This project started in April 2020, and the intention is to develop interoperability between existing information systems. There are 3 related initiatives. There's the Ocean Infrahep project, the IOC Ocean and Data Information System Catalog of Data Sources, and the Ocean Data and Information System. So the difference between the OAH project and ODIS is that ODIS is the infrastructure that provides the architecture and technology framework, whereas the Ocean Infrahep project develops and provides the Ocean Infrahep project implements ODIS at the regional level, taking care of partnerships, seeking national, regional, and international partners, developing the proof of concept of ODIS, providing training, communication, and outreach. So the Ocean Infrahep project will first work with global IOC associated online resources. These include Ocean Expert, Aqueducts, the Ocean Best Practices System, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, the World Ocean Database, and this is extended by partnerships with Eurasian Marine Training.eu, EMODNet, and other sources in the ODIS catalog. The project will also support capacity development in partnership with the Ocean Teacher Global Academy, and as well raise awareness of existing data standards through OBPS. We have 6 data patterns that we're working on initially. These are people, documents, spatial data and maps, training opportunities, vessels, and projects. And our 3 regional pilot regions are Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean region, and the Pacific Small Island Developing States, the first 2 of which are particularly relevant to today. So the global ocean data and information system architecture will be developed to enable this interoperability between different hubs or nodes, which could be global or could be regional or could be national. And there could be national oceanographic data centers, or there could be thematic hubs. And this is intended to be a matrix and not hierarchical at all. And this architecture will be developed with willing and able Ocean Infrahep early adopters in a co-design process. And it's based on lightweight schema.org implementation patterns. And we have developed proof of concept of this through exchange of metadata between databases using this ODIS architecture. And then just to close, the overall mission is to build a sustainable, interoperable, and inclusive digital ecosystem. Each partner would be in charge of their own contribution, and a set of minimal interoperable and exchange standards would allow nodes to cross-talk to others. Anyone would be able to spin up solutions like portals or hubs using the interoperability architecture, which facilitates greater inclusivity. Partners could index resources from and expose resources to other nodes, and partners are invited to co-develop the architecture as new needs arise. So there would be multiple entry points and levels of commitment to the network. And ultimately, we would see this as something that's project independent and IOD independent. Anybody would be able to implement it if they so choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. This is a very interesting development and certainly have a global impact. We've heard a lot of diverse thoughts, from rescuing floppy disks to the creation of various state-of-the-art repositories, and then moving on to the applications through the work of Mercator and the information for applications. Let me turn to just 2 questions. Maybe the panel can discuss these each for about 5 minutes. The first is, given what we're doing and a lot of adoption into the standards and best practices, how can we propagate the use throughout the whole region and collaborate together to form partnerships? Let me turn to the panel and ask their perspectives on this. I'll let you volunteer for a comment if you prefer.
If I
Go ahead, Jose.
Yes, I think this is a very important issue, and from our perspective, what we actually need is it's a change in culture. Most of you were from physical oceanography, climate background, So you understand very well the need of sharing data. But if you go into the biology or into other disciplines or into coastal ocean and coastal region, there is still the culture of the research data. It's my data. So we need to change that. And in order to change that and to make people aware that there are new practices in place, we need to invest in early career researchers. Only a new generation of people, only through capacity building of this new generation with the new culture is that we are going to be able to propagate the use of these standards around the region. And I think this is very important, and we have, and I was going to address that on my presentation. We need to get the new generation to think in a different way about data and be able to know that they need to share it and to be more intelligent about their use. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. Maybe I can turn.
Jay, can I say something about this?
Yeah, Dick, go ahead, please.
Yeah, okay. In fact, to follow on from Jose, I would say we have several aggregators, big infrastructures already who can do data management. And it would be very good if more and more research groups also make use of those, because it adds value to their data and also adds value to their own visibility. Because then we can, let's say, we can really use their data for many other applications. And and we use acknowledgement. So it means the researchers will get the credits, but also the researchers get more opportunities themselves, let's say, to work with other people's data and together, let's say, make more added value products and do better science. And that's a model that there are some major infrastructures, of course, not all around the Atlantic, but there are already many. And there's also a way, of course, to work on capacity building to create some more of these infrastructures that then can deal with regions. And this way build up this wider capability. Also, Lucy, of course, he's working on the global, but I think global can only be carried if you have it well organized at the national and the regional level, because otherwise you're in the top of the pyramid and you're reaching out, but you can't reach out to many thousands of parties, which is already being done, of course, by those regional infrastructures. So I would say let's promote that people are more embracing aggregators and see them as an added value. And this way have a better flow of the data with also at the same time adopting the standards, because that's compelling, it's obligatory more or less. But it then works in your own advantage, because you get better data yourself and you can also get more visibility and more scientific credits.
We're raising an interesting question of incentives for sharing data, but also for the use of best practices. Maybe I can turn to South Africa and Chicano. How do you work the environment of bringing up young researchers and getting broad adoption in your data environment?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. From the South African point of view, we are lucky that as the national department, we work closely with our national institutions of research, such as the University of Cape Town, the University of Pretoria, and some of these young or early career researchers are often on board our research vessels. They conduct some of the oceanographic research en route to Antarctica and some of the sub-Antarctic islands, Marion and Gulf Island. So we get to enjoy and benefit from some of these new talents, and as well as providing them an opportunity to get hands-on training and learning from some of the old researchers that are now facing retirement. And yeah, I think that's one point. But just to latch on what Jose mentioned about the conducting of research in silos, the breaking of that culture of not sharing is still a bit of a problem in some of the institutes, where people don't realize the benefits of sharing data and breaking those silos, that science cannot be conducted in silos really. But one other point is that when we do conduct and develop these systems or these data repositories, we must always bear in mind of the user and work our way from standardizing the data collection, archiving and sharing that data, having the user in our mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very good comment. And let me turn to Lucy for a moment. Lucy, you have a number of regional nodes, if I may call it that, in Ocean Info Hub. What's your experience in terms of bringing them together and encouraging the data sharing and the propagation of best practices?
Thanks, Jay. Well, I was actually going to give a very brief perspective from previous work on large marine ecosystem projects rather than the Ocean Info Hub. But my quick point was really just to make to point out the diversity of the region we're looking at. So not only this north-south disparity, the language diversity and the culture of data sharing. The culture of data sharing differs quite a lot from country to country. So as we've heard, open sharing of research and monitoring data might be routine in some areas, but other countries might be very resistant to sharing data with global aggregators. And in some countries, institutions don't even share data with each other, let alone with the rest of the world. So one approach to working with that difference is that very often teams of people are willing to work with each other, either on a data product or on metadata catalogs or on regional or national data management plans, which are transparent and at least show where data are housed. So exposing metadata also, as Dick mentioned, tends to raise profiles nationally and regionally, and also can lead to sharing of actual data further down the line. Thanks, just a quick perspective from me.
Yeah, that's a very, very important comment. Let me turn to the third question I had, and this will be the last one we'll address because of time. And that is, can we define key practices for building a sustained data capability, tools, training, and the open science processes and FAIR? And I know that Mercator has done a lot of work, not only in the very good modeling, but also in the training area. Maybe I can turn to Alain. You can talk about the idea of sustained data capabilities and also sustained users.
Yes. Can you hear me better with this microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Fine.
Sorry, because before I was very low. So yes, in fact, you're fully right. It's really important what we call the uptake here of data, a bit what I was mentioning in my first presentation. It's key in order to have the standard adapt. So let's say in the Copernicus Marine Service, we have been investing a lot of effort in training because once you have created any kind of product, this product is having no success if it's not used. And in order to have it used, especially with the new one, you need to train people on that. So let's say it's important to do that. It's important also to go to the, let's say, the next level. That's one we are implementing now. That is one of training trainers. Because we cannot do, everything from a central point of view. We need to be collaborative. You need to be able to get some relay in different countries to adapt to the different landscapes that we have seen in the previous presentation from Jose or Chicano. So I think it's key, and every time we enter with sometimes new product or new standard, you need really to give, let's say, a good part of your possible budget to that in order to really have an uptake of those new standards.
Thank you, Alain. That's a very important point to help with the propagation of the things that are important for interoperability and sustainability. Let me turn now to Connor, and from an eModNet perspective, Connor, let's talk about the tools that eModNet is looking at, in particular, the support in the broad range. And here I'll raise an interesting question, not only of the physical oceanography, but moving toward the chemistry and the biogeochemistry and biology?
So interesting question, because the eModNet Central Portal, as I mentioned, is an aggregator. So our communities, which are different thematic portals, tend to use the tools that they are familiar with. And they share through the Central Portal through web services, OGC web services. So we're using OGC web services as the glue to link the different communities together. So that people can discover and access data products and data through the Central Portal. So there's not necessarily a top-down approach. It's can very much be a bottom-up approach. And just something as while I have this moment, something I think that we also need to very be something we need to do in Europe that's very important is we need to start investing in our marine data managers. Marine data management in Europe, it tends to be you end up struggling and learning everything yourself. Whereas if you were in the United States, they have a thing called the Earth Science Information Practitioners, and they have conferences once a year or twice a year where they bring people from NOAA and NASA and all the different organizations together who are data managers, and they share their experiences together. And that is, data managers are vitally important in the whole space here.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. We're running out of time, and I'd like to just perhaps give a very brief summary. In doing that, let me also say that best practices can be propagated through the use of the Ocean Best Practices System, which is an IOC project. And as we gain our experiences, we should document those and put them into a place, in this case, the Ocean Best Practice System, where they're readily accessible to people to reuse. And as Fabian said, to build the last mile. I think with that, what we've seen is an emphasis on the use of standards. And I think the OGC and other standards are important. And certainly the new repositories are beginning to converge in that area. What we should do is document those as a community. What are we using and what are other people using, and how can we compare them and therefore make ourselves more interoperable? I think that's part of a community building process that is in fact the subject of the second session. And I'd like to thank all of our speakers. These were very interesting discussions, and as usual, we regret the lack of time to really get into this together. Maybe there'll be an occasion, and Sarah will offer you the challenge of creating yet another opportunity like this that we can come together on. Thank you very much to all the panelists. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to further interactions with you.
Thank you very much, Jay, and thank you to all our panelists to contribute to this very interesting and active first part. So we will break just for a few minutes. I would suggest 3 minutes, and we come back at, so on my clock it's 16:04, so let's gather here at 16:08, just for a comfort break, let's say. And then we'll have Martin Wiesbeck starting the second panel. You can stay there, don't close anything, and just be back in 4 minutes. Hello, welcome back. So I welcome now Martin Wiesbeck as chair of our second session, and here is the speakers that will join us. I hope you can properly see it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to all of the organizers also from the Blue Cloud Project for having this conversation here this afternoon, our time. And it is really a happy place for me to be when we just heard about some of the opportunities, some of the challenges, sort of where we are in sharing the data and building up that shared digital space for the All-Atlantic system as a piece of, I suppose, the global system. And I've been joined here with this conversation with what I think is an excellent panel. So we have Pier Luigi Buttigieg and he's a knowledge steward and senior data scientist at GeoMar, the Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research. It's also where I work. We have Tina Dohr. She is the Pangea project manager at MARUM. It's the University of Bremen in Germany. Kate Larkin is the deputy head of the EMODNet Secretariat at Seascape in Belgium. Also Anja Kreiner, she's with the National Marine Information and Research Center at the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Resources in Namibia. And next is Mark Takenot, and he's the team leader of the Fisheries Knowledge and Information Management System with FAO. And last but not least is Ben Williams, who's the MetOcean director for the American regions part of FUGRO. So I think we have a panel that cuts across various sectors. It's nicely balanced between some of the countries that are part of the Galway and Belém Agreement. And what I would like to start off with, have around with my panelists to just ask them the question, so where are we? What is the state of play? Reflecting a bit on what you just heard about the first panel. And so I want to hear just from your perspective. So I'm going to start off 2 minutes for Pierluigi. Give us your reflection on what you heard and I think where you think we should be going.
Thanks, Martin. The way that we were phrased the question is, what are the needs, the challenges, and the opportunities? And I think to sum it up at the beginning, I think we need to really revisit the original conception of the World Wide Web. I mean, the whole idea is that it's a democratic system. People with single computers or massive infrastructures can share data freely, as long as they're using common protocols. HTTP, the very technology we're using to talk to each other, has flattened the playing field and opened up so many opportunities. And I think we need to bring back things to that. So this goes into the needs that we have right now. We need to sort of foster more of a culture of digital responsibility from ocean science, but also other stakeholders, that everyone generating data should pay special attention to make sure that it gels with community standards and global standards for interoperability and exchange. Right now, that's not reviewed as much as it should be in terms of scientific outputs. That needs to change. That goes into the need to incentivize that. I mean, there's still no incentive to actually produce high quality digital products as much as papers, which are peer reviewed and their currency of science, so to speak. So I think a refocusing on data as a first-class scientific output, indeed, it's going to probably last longer in its impact than a paper. Provocative statement, but from my perspective, it's true. And indeed, that goes back to what Jose Enrique said in the first session. We need to strengthen those digital cultures that we have and also share capacities, make sure that scientific groups have digital technicians and data scientists able to leverage that data and also produce it. The main challenge for that is that it's still the case. We have wonderful technologies and capacities, but I still can't search across regions and across most domains. So there's that digital gap. We still have it, both multinationally, but also within nations, within fields even. And things like the FAIR principles have helped a lot. The CARE principles are on the table now. They're helped a lot, but there are very different interpretations of those. And in the sense, systems that are totally fair still can't talk to each other. So we need to go into a more of a mode of competition versus collaboration and make sure the interpretation of these principles can link. And then the last 15 seconds, I think we need more partnerships based on multilateralism from the beginning, to use mechanisms from the UN Ocean Decade that we have on the table too now, to help negotiate better data flows and more sustainable data flows by re-emphasizing the data over a single project or program, etc. Those will come and go, but the data will remain.
Thank you very much, Pierluigi, for that perspective. And colleagues from the audience, we just opened up the Mentimeter again, and we're asking you to give us your thoughts about where you see the current gaps in the Atlantic data space. We'll be discussing this with our panel interventions for a moment, but feel free to put your thoughts in and we'll reflect on some of your ideas in a moment. And I'm going to now ask Tina Dohr from Pangea. So Tina, I mean, Pangea is I think, is a system that is trying to do part, at least, of the answer that Pierluigi was giving, but I'm sure you have some reflection of from where you stand on this issue.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for having me here. So I think from so sort of where I stand looking, one sometimes gets the impression that the pyramid the aggregator infrastructures and the underlying basic archiving and repository infrastructure is sort of maybe reversed in how it should be. And I think part of the problem is that there's a lack of visibility of these very basic data archiving services like Pangea provides on a professional level with a standard that would actually enable this digital move, because just a DOI doesn't necessarily enable the data to be used in a useful and easy way. And if we're talking about big data and harvesting across infrastructures, that it needs a lot more than just putting data somewhere and saying it's open. So I think what I would see as a challenge is that for one, especially for the South Atlantic, we really have to think how we can sort of support the development of these very basic infrastructure feeds into the aggregators, the local or the global ones. And so we have to sort of do our homework there. And with that, I see as actually something that Wim Hugo brought up at the All-Atlantic Data and Policy Forum a couple of days ago, that there's really a lack of human capacity. We lack data curators, data managers, data stewards. There's sort of that group of people is missing in so many institutions and in the data centers and in projects and such, to bring in this data aspect to make sure that we do it right from the beginning and that we can really fulfill these big visions of the EOSC and Blue Cloud infrastructures and so forth. And so I'm hoping that sort of we can use the big power created by these very visible infrastructures, also ones like GEOS, for example, is like a system of systems, to feed down and really support these this basic level and build it out.
Yes, very good.
So
You're breaking here. Yeah, great, Tina. Thank you very much. The last sentence was gone, but I think we got everything you said. I think a very important point that you raised here. I want to go for a moment to Kate. And Kate, we heard from Fabienne this morning on some of the European initiatives in this space, which are really exciting. Some buzzwords like digital twins were also mentioned by Alain, but also really, from where you sit, I think, EMODnet has really helped to bring together, let's say, the European community, but now we're having a pan-Atlantic debate. So I wonder, what you heard this morning, and so from where you are, do you see the opportunities, the way forward?
Thank you very much, Martin. So yes, it's a pleasure to join the panel today to speak a little bit more about EMODnet following my colleague Connor's intervention earlier. As you probably heard, EMODnet is a long-term European marine knowledge initiative, and we work closely in collaboration with Copernicus Marine Service that you've also heard about today. And I think throughout the discussions, it's clear that everybody's on board that open science and open and free access to marine data is crucial. It's crucial for all of our operations, businesses, management of the ocean space, etc. And this is really coming. There's been a huge decade of progress across all fronts, but it's currently not equitable, right? So in Europe, we can speak in terms of EMODnet, Copernicus Marine Service, as a framework that are connecting, integrating data from thousands of producers. You've heard from Dick Sharp, all the very many networks, infrastructures that are contributing. And we have international research projects that are really promoting the collaborations at the research level, also with private sector, data sharing, etc. So these are projects like Atlantos, iAtlantic, Mission Atlantic, Atlantico. These are really connecting people and data services. But as Pierluigi was saying, we really need more of this regional connection. We have hotspots of really good expertise and capability. I only speak for Europe, there are many others, but there's probably less than there could be of the connection across these regional data initiatives to make sure that they're talking to each other and making sure that things are equitably shared. There's also, I should say, in terms of data sharing, people have talked about culture, but I think it's also about finding the win-win benefits and giving people reasons to share the data, and then hopefully the culture sort of naturally changes. So for example, in the All-Atlantic project, they're using a GeoNode, which is a web-based GIS tool. And this is exciting because it's not waiting until a research project or an industry operation has finished to get over these embargoes or commercial sensitivities of data. It's really putting up a sort of framework, a community tool online where researchers could not give access to their data, but share and visualize the data sets, the data layers, or the DIS, geospatial data, and share that even during a research project. And I think that's really exciting because it makes people connect more across interdisciplinaries. It makes industry realize that there are interesting data out there, and they're more likely to share their data, and it gets the data more ready and more fair to be ingested into these long-term data services like eModNet. So I'll stop there for now.
Yes, thank you very much, Kate. I think this is a very rich perspective that you bring here, and I think exactly on what we're discussing here this afternoon. Now, Anja, I want to turn to you, Anja Kreiner, and for this panel's perspective, you have this impossible job to speak for the South Atlantic region in total. So I'm not asking you to do that, but I think from where you are, in Namibia, you hear some of the conversations, some of the things that your colleagues from the European side of the house said. So what do you see the opportunities, the challenges? What would you make your work maybe more effective? So looking forward to your reflection, your perspective, Anja.
Thank you, Martin. I think the opportunities are that there is really a lot of data also in our region, not only from our institute, also citizen science from smaller institutes, probably industry, but it's very fragmented. And the challenges is that even for me, I'm a biologist, but I've been, not trained in data management, but throughout in Africa, it's just so overwhelming what's out there. So I think for an institute like ours, it's very difficult to sort of decide, if we now decide to submit our data somewhere, where do we go with? Where are our interests also covered? There was SETCO, which we were happy with for part of our data. But I think there's just so much out there. And another challenge is that definitely in Namibia, and I guess in many other countries, we don't have data managers. I mean, our institution doesn't have a data manager. So every scientist looks after their own data. And I think we're a step ahead from what Jose said. So it's not on paper anymore. Most of, there were initiatives, at least access databases and so on, but it's still on individual PCs. And people are also reluctant to share data because they don't always see the benefit, and they're worried that their data is used without their consent. And that's really an educational thing that I think needs to get into the tertiary education institutions already, that data is actually there for everybody and can benefit everybody. And then I think Pierre mentioned that internet bandwidth is another thing. Even if we know that things are available, we often can't access it. And my colleague Anja van der Plas is online, and I know that she often has to go home to actually download satellite data for our reports because our internet just doesn't do it.
Fantastic, Anja. I think these are really great perspectives to bring into the discussion. And I'm hearing already, in our conversation, one theme that is, the challenge of education about, where is all the training happening for the kinds of people, the Pierluigis, the Tinas of the world. I heard some numbers, Fabienne, I'm not quite sure what your numbers is, but I heard the numbers, at least just from the European side of the house, that there was an expectation that on the order of 500,000 new jobs will be coming in this space available in the next 10 years in this data science, data stewards world. And the universities in Europe are training maybe 50,000 or 60,000. So it's almost like a factor of 10 discrepancies between the kind of jobs available for people with that type of talent and the training that we do. So I think that's probably not that different in the US, and it's certainly, I'm sure, the same all around the globe. So I think very important points, Anja, and also that confusion about where to go. And so I want to take that thought of where to go. If I was an atmospheric scientist doing weather, weather, I know where to go. I go to the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, a UN organization, and they are the standard setting body. It's pretty clear. So FAO here, Mark, is FAO helpful here? You are representing an activity from a UN body, and sort of what is your reflection? Where do you see opportunities, against the kind of discussions that we're having here? Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Yes, I'm working in FAO, and I've been playing in the last 10 to 15 years the role of a mediator between infrastructure providers and those who benefit from it. And I would like to take a big step away from the infra technologies here and position the people who benefit from the oceans at the center of my intervention. Don't forget the enormous challenge that is facing us to eliminate hunger and feed 9 billion people by 2050, and the role of fish in the nutrition of these people. And if we want fish to be still there by 2050, we need to make sure that our ocean sustainably provide fish for decades. So we have a big opportunity, which is the Agenda 2030 of the UN for the Sustainable Development Goals. There, different UN agencies are custodian, and FAO in particular is custodian agency of SDG 14 and SDG 2 for hunger. We have a mandate to work with countries and to help them meeting their goals. And we are expected to foster the science which these countries they need to monitor their progress towards the SDGs. This is all about converging our efforts to the UN world communities to meet these goals. It's absolutely crucial and important. SDG 14, for example, calls for mainstreaming biodiversity, marine environment considerations, reducing pollution in fisheries and aquaculture. And so we need to work with other UN custodian agencies, for example, UNEP or IOC, and build support to multidisciplinary science. We have a number of questions that science should answer for that. So let me say from the onset that as a custodian agency of SDG 14 and SDG 2, we welcome the development of large data spaces like the Atlantic data space, but these have to enable communities and the people that in the end benefit from our work to access and share, benefit from multidisciplinary knowledge on ocean sustainability for a healthy planet. And the point is really, let's put the people who we work with at the center of the services that we generate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think an excellent perspective, really also thinking about, what is the role of the UN, how does this Atlantic data space help with the 2030 agenda, for the Atlantic region, and that sort of drive and motivation. I really also like the framing of, let's put the users in the center here. Let's really look at this challenge from their perspective. Now, let's move over to another perspective. Ben, I'm very grateful to have you here. Again, the private sector is a big actor in this space. And again, you will have the impossible job to speak for the private sector, which I know I'm not going to even challenge you. But from Fugro is one of those examples. Where are you in this thinking? Is it attractive for you to think about an Atlantic data space? Where do you see opportunities moving forward? Ben, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Martin, and thank you to Blue Cloud for having me. I think minds are shifting in the public space. I think my young workforce wants me engaged in ocean science more than chasing oil and gas contracts. They understand about the sustainable future. They understand about sustainable oceans. And I think over the last 5 or 6 years, we've started making a shift in the industry space. Collaborative research and partnerships have become more and more popular, more accessible, more opportunities exist. Where I sit in a competitive landscape with my competitors, I don't sit in a competitive landscape with researchers. We've managed to bring together and utilize National Academies of Science funding, National Science Foundation, NOAA funding across the US to bring public-private partnerships together with academia and share ship time and contribute data and derivative products without compromising the deliverables for my ultimate client and the operator in energy extraction. So it's really really opened up opportunities for researchers and open up opportunities for partnerships. I would encourage any academic researchers who are struggling with finding ship time to reach out to a private company or an industry and look for, if only sharing ship time, not necessarily data. This gives a lot more money and a lot more funding to data collection and filling data gaps when you're not paying for extra diesel and extra ship days. So yeah, this spans north to south. We have projects from Europe all the way to Argentina. So
wonderful, Ben, and thank you very much for that. And I know you know, your company is quite a big operator, but there's also others good examples that I'm aware of from Brazil, you know, where companies or competitors do similar types of work. And I was also pleased that Anya already brought in the role of other actors, including, you know, the what you might call citizen science or the citizen engaged data gathering of various types. So I think this enormity of different types of data coming together, plus the lack of sort of a go-to place, makes one of these challenges, I think, that maybe a year or two John Bell once put to me, and I still, that resonates with me, that frame. You know, how can we collectively think of ocean observing, ocean data, not as a niche activity, you know, that Blue Crowd projects, EMODnet, you know, Martin Wisbeck's of the world think about, but make it the norm, sort of things that actually nations do as part of their norm operations, things like health services, weather forecast, environmental services. So how can we move the dial from this niche operation with all the specialities and the many actors that Anya was complaining about to something which is more norm-wise organized? So what are some steps there? I saw in our Mentimeter some elements of that thought and thinking there. So I would like to encourage my panelists to think about that, maybe take some suggestions from the Mentimeter that came here from our colleagues that are listening, and maybe from some of you. And let's have another round of exchange of view. So Pierluigi, so what attracted you there from what you saw in the Mentimeter or on this sort of big picture thinking? How can we really move the dial to the next phase of really this Atlantic data space, this data sharing, this new kind of world we're all trying to move towards? So over to you, Pierre.
And looking at the Mentimeter, also answering some of the questions in the chat and the Q&A, I'd like to sort of take a step back and go to first principles. We're in a gold rush scenario right now. Lots of people are moving into the data space and they have brilliant ideas, solutions that come up from projects, but are sometimes hard to then build and connect up into a legacy that we leave the next generation who has to build on it and actually develop more advanced systems like the forecasting, weather style forecasting services that you speak of. So I'd like to go back to first principles and say, let's again, refocus on the data and metadata itself. Let's improve that. Let's make sure we're using global norms, and if they don't exist, negotiate them, create them so that we can actually leave a legacy that's in the data itself. So you don't need a certain tool, you don't need a certain software, a certain project or infrastructure doesn't need to be there. We can shift it. And this is very important in the policy reality we're in. We know very recently policy changes, and there's a risk of all the climate data being deleted in a certain nation, right? We need to be able to move that over quickly to other nations to protect our digital legacy for science, but also for sustainable development, also to meet the needs of people. And I'm reminded of my graduate student, Raisa Meyer. She's working on omics metadata, so microbiome things. And again, she always makes the point, the metadata that we have in biology is another field's core data. So it's not accessory, it's not extra. We have to have that concept in our mind when we're then creating these systems so that the physical systems can pull from the biological and vice versa. It's all the same thing in the end. We need to look at the same ecosystem. So that's the thinking I'm extracting here.
Very good, Pierre. Very interesting and fundamental thoughts here. It's really the building blocks. Once we have those in order, I think we can build something very solid out of that. Tina, so from where you are, from Pangea, sort of the community that you are with, are we making progress on this type of, standardizing, working together, really making us our way to allow that activity to become more the norm rather than an expert type of business?
And well, I think that there's definitely an improvement, and one can see from my user base, basically, of people coming to Pangea to publish data, that people are willing to take up, be very patient about data publication, because they want to make sure that all these building blocks with their data are in place. And that entails a very long process of, using controlled vocabularies for the parameters that they're submitting. For example, it seems like a very simple thing, but in the end, it's sort of that's the long-term strategy. If you can't grab things from different places because they're named the same thing, though it seems simple, you can't put them together easily. So I think we're definitely making progress, but services like Pangea, for example, are not that common. So I think that's why we have such a worldwide user base. And Anya was also saying is sort of Pangea is one of the places she knows where to go to archive data in that way. But I think this is something that we are also approached often by other data repositories to find out what are we doing, how are we implementing it, and what they're always shocked about is how much per people we need to do the job. So I think if we keep an eye on that, we need to develop this human capacity to manage it. Then everything else is like Luigi said, if you get your basics right, then you can do all the rest too, because then it really flows through. But for that, it needs to have the right shape.
Thank you, Tina. I think that's a great perspective. Now, Kate, I want to challenge you in a particular direction. I think it was brought up also in Jabe's panel, and I think I see some suggestions here in the Mentimeter. It's about incentives. What do you guys do at eModNet to incentivize the countries of the European Union to play, with eModNet, and how can we use that success, or what are the incentives that you see for really people to take that extra step that Jose was saying, hiring those data stores, the technicians to really share the data. We made it maybe from paper to digital, as Anya was saying, but now, sharing it across an institution or a country or even the whole Atlantic region. So where are we setting the right incentives? Are the incentives there? Are there new ones we can think about? Any thoughts along those lines, Kate?
Okay, you set me a challenge. So in eModNet, over the last decade, there's been developed, European standards for, we've talked about metadata, we've talked about data, but in terms of creating a sort of large community of people, because above all, the data sharing, the data management, data stewardship process is really about getting people on board to want to share, to really want to use standards, and then come up with these common identifiable standards and harmonization, which makes the data then useful. So in eModNet, that has been a real incentive that we've had both top down from policy within the Inspire directive, for example, in Europe, in talking with international efforts to have international standards. But then there's been the bottom up push from data providers who want to connect. We've now connected across eModNet from the research community, the likes of Eurogoose and operational oceanography, through to other sustained observations. There's much more that can be done, but the diverse sources of data that are coming in to the likes of eModNet now can be further strengthened. And I think one big asset of both eModNet and Copernicus Marine Service is a data ingestion, which is a public service. So we've talked about capacity, and this really is an incentive for anybody who has data that they would like to share. There are public services that can help support this data stewardship process. So by submitting an interest online through the eModNet data ingestion, you'll have experts discovering with you which thematics your data are for, the standards, the minimum metadata requirements that are needed to make those data fair and accessible and discoverable. And this is crucial, because if people can see that their data are fit for use as well, and they can follow that journey, and they can be credited, which is captured in the metadata, right? So it's important to say, where the data come from, and that carries through the data, through the provenance, so that whoever uses it will credit back to the originator. This is something we're looking at in eModNet as well, and others, to see how we can make the full circle, so we can really have more metrics to show the uptake, the use, and then the impact of data. And I think this will be crucial going forward as we look to diversify data sources. We work with the likes of citizen science and more civil society. If we want people to share their data, there will have to be an incentive back to them to show that their data are useful, maybe in world ocean assessments of the future. Perhaps this would be amazing if we could find the right standards, the provenance, and then the ways to integrate all these different sources of data, and then go back to those data providers and show them how valuable their data are, which in turn will initiate more funding, it will initiate more momentum in the public, it will gather more ocean literacy to make people more aware and to in turn change the culture.
Thank you very much. Very rich perspective, Kate. I really appreciate that. I know I gave you a hard question. You answered it quite well. Thank you very much for that. Now we're going to change in the Mentimeter, the new set of questions, but we're going to still discussing a bit the ones that we were just looking at. Mark, I want to come back to the role of the UN. I mean, on the one hand, I'm very excited. We just yesterday or the day before yesterday had the international launch of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. It's a framework of collaboration. It's a framework of lifting each other up. It's also a framework of really leaving nobody behind. Very important frames on the UN. At the same time, as you well know, in the area of ocean data and responsibility, you mentioned some that FAO carries. There's the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, who's an actor. There's the United Nations Environment Program Regional Seas, which is an actor. We have the World Meteorological Organization's ambition on ocean data, maybe closer to some of the forecasting abilities. So where do you see an opportunity just across the UN family, as it were, to maybe use the decade or other formats to really, make it clear for a naive user like myself, where's the go-to place in the UN system for some of these challenges around all-Atlantic data science and data spaces? Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, you rightly pointed on this week's launch of the Ocean Decade. I would say for us, I mean, FAO, we have a major role at global level in fisheries and aquaculture, and we have been working for, since the web is there, to foster better data exchange, information exchange through application of data standards, and progressively with web-based through metadata standards, etc. But now, again, we have a requirement, an expectation that we can work across disciplines. I said fisheries, aquaculture, biodiversity, marine environment, pollution, and so on. And if we want really to successfully achieve cloud-based multidisciplinary science, we really need to firmly harness our information technology challenges around these powerful policy drivers, such as the SDGs. And the Ocean Decade is a way to reach out to across agencies and with countries. We have, for example, submitted as FAO 2 programs under the UN Decade of the ocean science, and one is called the Digital Innovation Hand in Hand with Fisheries and Ecosystem Scientific Monitoring. So the program is designed to foster technology partnerships in support to very concrete needs. We want to boost countries' capacities, for example, in reporting their fish stock status as an SDG indicator. And for that, we have a partnership, an information sharing partnership, which can support that. It's called FIRMS, the Fisheries and Resource Monitoring System. But again, beyond this strictly fisheries domain, and if we want to mainstream these other disciplines, biodiversity, marine environment consideration, fisheries and aquaculture, we should try through these actions of the Ocean Decade to identify also field projects. The GAF for the GCF programs, funding program, are working with countries to formulate projects where we can engage ourselves in and involve local, national scientific communities and help them produce indicators which their country need to measure progress towards these goals. And I would say, as infrastructure providers, let's set ourselves this objective to have data infrastructure that are very cost efficient, that are simple, very simple to use, and that implies overall standardization and deep collaboration across all the actors and end-to-end users.
Thank you very much, Mark. This is a great perspective. I want to give like 2 minutes to Ben here to just say from what you heard from the private sector side, add to that, and then we're going to go into this rapid fire, one wish each moment to close it off here. Ben, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I suppose I can start with a couple of the priorities I'm thinking initially is unlocking some of the industry data, right? There's unique data sets that are held by industry, not Fugro-owned data sets that we can share, but with our clients and end clients. I think Total drilling the deepest well in the world in Uruguay at 4,000 meters. I mean, the ability to gain access to data from 4,000 meters water depth in the Southern Atlantic Ocean is gold dust to research, and it is locked in industry archives. Likewise, some of the EEZs that don't allow data sharing, right? We need to unlock some of these government policies to participate in this all-Atlantic data space, and really a global data space. I mean, Brazil and India being the two that spring to mind that hold on to their data very tightly, and without getting a complete ocean, it's not going to be possible to have that all-Atlantic data space.
Thank you very much, Ben. And some people who know me a little longer know that is one of my hobby horses. I find it just appalling that nations allow, private sector actors, and I don't mean you, Fugro, from the private sector point of view. If you take data which are economically valuable and you say, they're proprietary for some length of time, that's fully understood. But I think there ought to be an expiry date on this, so that automatically after 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, they become part of the public record. This is not the private sector's job. This is not Fugro's job. This is the regulator's job. This is the countries around the Atlantic Rim to say, we don't allow that. That's our law. Data about the environment cannot be held forever in private. They have to become part of the public record at some point. In the US, even political documents become part of the public record after some length of time. Why can't we do it with environmental data? So Ben, thank you very much for bringing up that opportunity. And I know Fugro is a big ally in this, because I think it's also in your interest to really open up the kind of data that you have, and get out of these non-disclosure agreements that don't expire, and if they would have been written with an expiry date, it would be easy, right? Anyway, there are many opportunities here. Thank you very much, colleagues. Fabienne, I'm going to ask you also at the end to give us your wish. You are not formally part of our panel, but you are part of the whole discussion. So I'm going to go to my panels first, and then I want your wish, the one wish for this community at the end. So rapid fire, because I need to give a few minutes for a summary, and then also to really give Sarah the opportunity to go forward. I see some excellent suggestion about the priorities here and the Mentimeter. But Pierluigi, what is your main suggestion, your main wish for the future that you want to register here for us, for the panel, and for those who listen?
Okay. So, from the perspective of building digital ecosystems, they're socio-technical. We have the technologies. We need improved digital diplomacy to get science bridged internally, and then to bridge it to sustainable development actors. Only then can we start to bridge the digital divide that's basically harming. It's toxic to our basin scale initiatives. And once we start bridging that divide, the best way to equalize voices is to refocus on the data, make sure that can circulate beyond programs, projects, infrastructures, can be reused, repackaged to get ready for AI-driven futures and computational abilities we can't even dream of yet.
I'm sure the fairy heard that. It was a long wish, but a good one. Tina, over to you.
Yeah, I fully agree with Pierre. And I would like to sort of add on to that I hope that from the human capacity side, we can sort of form an all-Atlantic data manager or stewards or something community which comes from all levels of this all-Atlantic Ocean data space, which has many levels to it. And so we bring all these people together and across disciplines and sort of manage to form a community that can, become active in creating this alignment in their respective environments.
Fantastic wish, Tina. Thank you very much for that. Kate, what is your wish here?
So for me, it's coming back to the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, all ocean basins are special, but I've had the pleasure to be at sea on the Atlantic Ocean. I know it's vast. Everyone knows it's interconnected in any ocean space. So if we really want to understand and manage and conserve it, we do need this move towards a more holistic transdisciplinary data space for the Atlantic Ocean, not just for marine data, in fact, but across bringing in socioeconomic and human activities data as well. But these data have to be fit for use. So it's basically what other people have mentioned about not just being able to find the data, but it has to be interoperable. Crucially, it has to have these metadata, because as others were saying, if we're going to move into the new paradigms of digital oceans, predictive capabilities and simulations at really complex levels, those metadata are going to be the gold that make the data usable throughout. So that's really crucial, and just a sort of call for all regions where possible to really move towards this, so that in eModNet, for example, we're centralizing all our data and data products. We're bringing together a centralized metadata catalog, which for eModNet will be a game changer, but it's only part of the puzzle. So we should see how to connect all of those.
Thank you very much. These wish lists get longer and longer as we go. And let's see if we can get some to the point ones. Anya, what's your wish?
Well, my wish is that through some or other method, which unfortunately I don't know, we can raise political awareness. And actually following up on what Ben says, that countries have data policies that are implemented, that sort of in a few years these problems don't occur, because somebody who starts working somewhere knows what to do with data, and the end product is in the open ocean. And I think what we can look into is using the Ocean Decade for that, or the high-level panel on blue economy or sustainable ocean economy, to try and feed in our agenda everywhere where we can on the highest level.
Fantastic, Anya. That is really that getting from niche to norm agenda here. Wonderful. I'm with you 100% here. Mark, from your perspective, what's your wish?
Well, as everyone, I would say first that because here we have one all-Atlantic data space, and as you know, there are many platforms developing from different perspectives. So not every piece of information can be in one single platform. It has to flow across many platforms. So standards first, and standards development for data, statistics, and data points. Metadata standards. One point we addressed in the past few years were legal interoperability. Your metadata should have first copyright and terms of use. Otherwise, you cannot start to really work across the platforms. And then the benefits of having existing information sharing partnerships working together more. Even in FAO, we have two in our group, it's FIRMS and ASPA, and now with the web-based science, we acknowledge all the benefits that making them exchanging and exchanging services can bring to each other. And I'm sure this can flourish much more with other information partnerships. And finally, this point of do it once and utilize in many ways. Yes, it's a simple idea in principle, but I can tell you that touching upon the deep elements of it, if you have not very robust, credible, and multifaceted infrastructure, you meet obstacles everywhere, and you cannot take care of all the requirements regarding, in particular, confidentiality, security, access requirements, which differ from one group to another one. And that requires a lot of work, formal arrangements between the IT suppliers. They need to work really very closely and consider integrating technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Again, we're getting these long wishes. I have a short one for you, Mark. Let's make this UN Ocean sort of coalition of the UN agencies work and help us with that. That would be my wish for your part as well. But I think you gave much more specific answers to that. Ben, over to you. What is your wish for the future?
funded public-private partnerships, changing industry measurements into ocean observations, sustained through the decade.
Fantastic, Ben. So
Short enough for
Fabienne,
you?
Fabienne, you heard all these my panel's short wishes. So over to you. Any reactions, or you want to add one? That would be great. Fabienne, you're still muted. Can you unmute your microphone? Yeah.
Sorry, I try. For me, I think there is one action that should be done, possibly led by IOC or in the frame of the UN decade, and also with WMO, under GCOM also possibly, is to reach the governments in order to change the data policy principles everywhere. And make it at government level so that it reaches both the ocean physics, which is already open, but the biology, and possibly socioeconomic data like fisheries data, which are a bit sensitive. But I think the action has to be done at government level so that it's done. Otherwise, it will not be possible. And this has to be led by someone really strong and big. So it cannot be someone else than IOC and WMO together, maybe, because they have power, because they inherit from the meteorological network and practices, and we need to mature as they did. And we need to convince that this is mandatory so that we know where are the fish stocks in the future and where is food. And this is a common share and a common problem, like the clouds and the weather. This is my first point. The second point is maybe to start somehow technically the work. For me, it's not about a new data space, Atlantic or not Atlantic. It's not about a new data space. I think to favor collecting and accessing data, we need to simplify life to the scientists, the students that are doing the work, and also to do it, what we can do is maybe try to develop a tool, an ingestion tool, to make data archaeology and data rescue first. Because in fact, we have a lot of data. No one has time to transform, to digitize, to scan this data into bits, I would say, because it's paper and this is stored elsewhere. So maybe technically, I think if we can do something, it's like an ingestion portal that is shared. And really working on archaeology and rescue. And once this will be used for rescue, it can be used for the rest.
Fantastic, Fabienne. And I also think these same type of interfaces would also enable citizens and other actors to really bring in their information to our systems. Fantastic.
And then it's important that standards are transparent for the people. It worked quite well with the ingestion portal in IMONET and in Copernicus. It simplified so much.
Great.
So it's pragmatic.
Yeah. Fabienne, thank you very much for that perspective. And I think, there's no need for me as the chair to summarize the panel because you have summarized our panel so well. Jay, I think we're going to hand back in a moment to our organizers here, but I wanted to give you just a quick chance to say one reflection summary from the first panel before we end this discussion here for everybody. Over to you, Jay, and then I think Sarah will close us off here.
Thank you very much, Martin, for a very interesting second panel. A summary is that the two panels are moving the same direction, which is community creation, collaboration, and interoperability. And the fact is that we need to come together as a community to define what that means, perhaps under the Ocean Decade or under, as Fabienne says, the IOC. Thank you very much.
I guess, Sarah, over to you. 3 minutes left.
Thank you. I mean, I was astonished, can I say that, from this incredibly, interesting discussion, which I've tried to summarize. I hope I got all your points. I mean, of course, this will be followed up by a report and by the proceedings with all the materials we've shared, including the outcomes of the Mentimeter. But very briefly, we started with Fabian reiterating the needs of avoiding duplication to focus on this extra mile in terms of that data gathering, targeting new data sources, so from industry, citizen sciences, IoT, students, and doing that via use cases. We've talked about issues on long-term data preservation from some countries, but we've then discovered that it's an issue from many different. And so again, metadata policies and interoperability can help in that direction. We talk about the community memory of, ages of data gathering all across the Atlantic regions and the importance to retrieve and go back to those data. Sorry, standards and interoperability were all across your discussions. Again, the aim is to reach a fair approach from the very start, so from data gathering to data archiving to reuse across all our regions. There is a lot to do. Legal interoperability is also a part of this activity when dealing with different regulations and legislations. A changing culture might also be, needed somehow, since we work now with a new generation of data manager and of scientists, and that's why the focus on training and in particular new professionalizations such as the need of data stewards and managers is needed. We need to align human capacity possibly across the regions. Incentives and a way to recognize the effort that researchers and data providers are doing in producing the data must be acknowledged in some way. Budget is an issue, of course, as ever, and a good point was made about in introducing private partnerships along this road. Best practices should always be there. We need to focus on users in any case, both when we deal with the scientists as end users or the end users of the final products that we're going to deliver. We talked about policies. So ocean observing should become the norm and pushed from a policy level. We need to identify programs in different countries and possibly have governments supporting international, let's say, focus policies aligning to the ocean decade. Metadata is the starting point, since the data delivery is the clue. It's not just the knowledge sharing about data, but it's really the data themselves. We should unlock industry archives and identify new social contracts with industry, and data rescue, archaeology, and data ingestion portals must be supported. We've also learned about some new, at least from some of us, initiatives. So we've talked about the Marine Information Management System of South Africa, BAMBA Brazil, the Brazilian Marine Biodiversity Database, the IMBER project, I hope I got the link right, the GeoNode portal from All-Atlantic, the First Fair project in Europe, the NOAA's World Ocean Database, and EMODNet services such as the data ingestion portal, and as well as firms from FAO. I know there are many more, but I think it was an incredible panel, an incredible event. I really thank all of you. And my wish is that this will be replicated possibly within the time frame of the Blue Cloud initiative. And I really also want to thank all the program committee that supported us in having this possible, and the All-Atlantic Research Alliance, Ocean Research Alliance team for hosting us as a side event. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll share the proceedings in the next days. Stay tuned and follow us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.